The sun never sets on the Golden Arches. From Buenos Aires to Beijing, McDonald's is the most recognized brand in the world. The man behind it all is not a smiley-faced clown named Ronald, but a sharply dressed salesman named Ray Kroc. Kroc helped sell the world on the concept of fast food and made himself a McMillionaire. Raymond Albert Kroc was born in Chicago in 1902. His father, Louis, earned a modest living working for Western Union, while his mother, Rose, made extra money giving piano lessons. Ray was soon joined by a younger brother named Bob and a little sister named Lorraine. In 1905, the Krocs moved to this house in Oak Park, a western suburb of Chicago. Here, Rose ran a tight ship, and with the help of her children, made sure the house remained spotless.
My mother, every Saturday and often during the week, would scrub the kitchen floor, and this was usually on hands and knees. And after they finished scrubbing, they'd put newspapers down to walk on, so we wouldn't leave any footprints.
Ray was more than happy to help his mother with the housework. Sweeping was his specialty. As a child, Ray seemed more ambitious than most other kids his age. Perhaps this caused his parents to ponder their son's future. When Ray was just 4 years old, his father took him to see a phrenologist, a practitioner who claimed he could predict the future by reading bumps on a person's head. Ray's chart revealed that his future would be in the food service industry. That prediction was fulfilled almost immediately. While still in grammar school, the enterprising Ray Kroc started a lemonade stand in front of his house, worked in a grocery store, and spent a summer behind the soda fountain in his uncle's drugstore. Ray began to see the world as one big place to sell to. By the time he was a teenager, Ray had no patience for school. Instead of studying, he spent much of his time thinking up new schemes to make money.
He wasn't bound by normal constraints in his head. He would do things, as a kid and as a teenager, sidewalk juice markets. No one's going to come and buy that. Well, no, I'll do it. I'll market it. I'll put a sign up. And he wouldn't take no for an answer. If he had an idea, there was a way to make that idea a reality.
One place that Ray's dreams ran wild was the stadium that would become Wrigley Field. Kroc himself was a pitcher for his school baseball team, and he spent many summer afternoons dreaming about life in the big leagues. But Ray soon realized that his fastball wasn't going to make him rich. He felt the same way about his schoolwork. By his sophomore year, Ray was looking for an excuse to quit, and found it when America entered World War I. He was too young to join the Army, but he sold his parents on letting him join the Red Cross Ambulance Corps.
Well, he was almost 16, and my parents didn't want him to join up, but well, he wanted to do what other fellows were doing, and he didn't like school.
Kroc headed to Connecticut to train with the Red Cross's Company A. But the war ended just before he could ship out for France. He returned home and, at his parents' urging, gave school one more chance. He lasted one semester before quitting for good in 1919. That summer, he took a job at the resort area of Paw Paw Lake, Michigan. There, he met a young woman named Ethel Fleming. The two hit it off and began dating. After 3 years, Ray thought it would be a good idea if they got married. His father felt differently. Since Ray and Ethel were both still minors, he refused to grant his permission until his son was steadily employed. To appease his father, Ray found work within a few days selling Lily brand paper cups. From his first day on the job, Ray was a natural.
Ray was a born salesman. He was quite a talker when he got going, especially if he wanted to sell something.
But Ray was more than talk. He was young, ambitious, and willing to work hard for long hours. He also understood the power of a good first impression and was absolutely meticulous about his personal appearance.
He was a clean freak, very, very spit and polish image. You know, the brill cream in the hair, perfectly starched shirt with a tie perfectly tied, manicured nails.
Ray's squeaky clean image helped him sell paper cups to everyone, from Italianized street vendors to the concessionaire at his beloved Wrigley Field. Then he found the client that would make him a top salesman in his company: the drugstore soda fountain. In the 1930s, bustling soda fountains could be found in every city across the country.
You could go in and get a Green River or a Hoboken or a Black Cow or a Cherry Coke or whatever you wanted. And the fact is that the soda fountain, even before the beginning of this century, was a place where you could go for not a meal, but a snack. Something quick, something easy, something refreshing. It was easy in, easy out.
Ray convinced soda fountain owners that they could get customers in and out even quicker with his paper cups. He showed them how they could increase profits by selling drinks to go. When he signed a contract with Walgreens, the largest drugstore chain in the Midwest, Ray Kroc became the star salesman in his company. Kroc sold paper cups for 16 years. His commission provided a nice lifestyle for his wife, Ethel, and their daughter, Marilyn, who was born in 1924. But the money came at the expense of his relationship with his family. Work was everything to Ray. He spent countless hours with his customers, learning everything he could about what worked and what didn't work in the food industry.
I made up my mind that if I ever got into the food business, I would do what this one was doing or what that one was doing, and I wouldn't do what that other one was doing. And I got so that I could assess values.
In 1939, Kroc saw value in the new device one of his customers had built, a 5-spindled milkshake machine called the multi-mixer. Kroc knew immediately that a machine capable of making 5 milkshakes at a time was a big improvement over the single-spindled machines that most soda fountains were using. At 37, Kroc left a successful career in the paper cup business and became the multi-mixer's exclusive distributor.
Ray made a lot of money selling multi-mixers. I think in the late 40s or around 1950, he was making about $25,000 a year, which was a lot of money in those days.
But as Ray approached his 50th birthday, his business began to slow down. By the early 1950s, suburbs began blanketing the American landscape, and the exodus from the cities was on. Many neighborhood soda fountains were forced to close up shop. Ray was losing customers by the dozen. But one small restaurant in San Bernardino, California, kept ordering more machines. Kroc had to see for himself the type of place that needed to churn out up to 40 milkshakes at a time. In 1954, he flew to California and met the 2 brothers who would change his life, Dick and Mac McDonald. In the late 1920s, while Ray Kroc was selling paper cups around Chicago, 2 brothers from New Hampshire were heading out west to California. Richard and Maurice McDonald, or Dick and Mac, as friends and family called them, were off to seek their fortune.
I said, I've decided I'm going to be a millionaire, I says, when I'm 50. So, geez, my brother looked at me, no kidding. He says, how much have you got right now? I says, about $8.50. He says, Richard, you've got a little way to go, my friend.
The two brothers spent a few years pushing sets around a Hollywood movie studio before opening their own theater in the early 1930s. But it soon became clear that showing movies was not going to fulfill Dick's lofty financial goals. Eventually, the brothers noticed that the hot dog stand on the corner of their street seemed to be the only thriving business in the area. In 1937, they took a cue from their successful neighbor and opened their own small hot dog stand a few towns away. 3 years later, they moved to San Bernardino, California, and opened a larger drive-in restaurant complete with car hops called McDonald's. Like most other drive-ins that were popping up on the West Coast, it was an immediate success. Californians delighted in getting full menu service without ever leaving their beloved automobiles. For 8 years, Dick and Mac ran the most successful drive-in in town. But in the late 1940s, the McDonald brothers sensed a change in their customers. After World War II, Americans began to look at the world in a whole new way.
After the war, there was this sense that we worked hard, we fought, we won this war. Now the good life is ours. It is owed to us. And by definition, that good life involves speed of all kinds. Speed in fast cars with tail fins that look like they could fly, and speed in terms of getting what you want when you wanted it.
We were kind of getting into an age of jet propulsion, and this was really a horse and buggy operation. So we knew we had to do something to speed things up.
The McDonald's closed their successful drive-in and set out to reinvent the restaurant business. What they created was a kitchen that operated with the efficiency of a Henry Ford assembly line. They cut their menu from 25 items down to 9. Hamburgers, cheeseburgers, milkshakes, French fries, and drinks. They sped up service by designing new equipment like bigger grills and condiment dispensers that allowed them to prepare each and every burger the very same way. Most importantly, they changed over from car hop service to self-service.
When people found out what we were going to do, they thought we had gone insane. Because we had a great business. We had the most popular drive-in in town, and people couldn't understand. They said, my God, the McDonald brothers, I think that they're losing their minds.
But they weren't losing their minds. They were simply pioneering the greatest revolution in American restaurant history: fast food. The McDonald brothers cut serving time down from 20 minutes to 30 seconds. To do that, they broke almost every rule in the business.
I mean, the point of going out to a restaurant was you could have steak, you could have shrimp, you could have fish, you could have chicken. The idea of going to a place that had a hamburger, and if you don't like that, you could have a hamburger, and if you don't like that, you could have a hamburger. It in a way it defies logic, but that's sometimes what great genius is. It defies logic.
The McDonald's genius revealed itself at the cash register. Sales shot up 40% in 3 years. In 1952, their small hamburger stand in San Bernardino made the cover of American Restaurant magazine. Pretty soon, everyone wanted to know how they did it. Over the next few years, people in the food industry came from all over the country to check out the McDonald brothers' operation. One visitor had been preparing his whole life for just such an opportunity: Ray Kroc.
He saw the reaction of the public. He had to see young families there. It wasn't a teenage place. Drive-ins then were teenage places, kind of hangouts. None of that. And So I wasn't there, but I'm confident that the potential on the consumer side, he saw it. Bingo, he saw it.
Kroc was 52 years old. He had seen thousands of restaurants before, but nothing like this. He calculated the financial rewards possible with hundreds of McDonald's across the country, each of them equipped with 8 multi-mixers. But when he discussed the idea with Dick and Mac, they told him they weren't interested in doing it themselves.
Well, I said, why don't you get somebody to do it? They said, well, we don't know anybody who want to do it. I said, well, how about me? He said, do you want to bother with it? I said, sure. And I thought, oh boy, what a cozy way to sell multi-mixers.
Kroc signed a contract that gave him the exclusive right to sell the McDonald brothers method. But when he returned to suburban Chicago to open his first McDonald's, he was in for a surprise. The McDonald brothers neglected to tell him that they had previously licensed this part of Illinois to another company. Before Ray could start doing business, he had to buy out the competing contract for $25,000. Already deeply in debt from building his restaurant, Kroc could barely afford this expense. It was the first of many problems between Ray and the brothers McDonald. By the mid-1950s, America was moving out to the suburbs, and Ray Kroc was only too happy to follow. In April of 1955, Kroc opened his first McDonald's restaurant in the Chicago suburb of Des Plaines. 2 shining golden arches and a brightly colored neon sign caught everyone's attention. The red and white tiled building was spotless inside and out, and Ray made sure it stayed that way.
If there was one thing that Ray was fanatical about, it was absolute cleanliness. Here was a man who in his now mid-50s or early 50s would spend his Saturdays scrubbing the sidewalk, sometimes with a little brush to get gum off the sidewalk.
One Saturday I came into the Des Plaines McDonald's and Ray was in the back sink and he had the mop wringer up in the sink and he brought an old toothbrush from home. And he was literally scrubbing the corners and the crevices of this mop wringer.
Ray knew the Des Plaines store had to be perfect because it was the showcase he would use to sell McDonald's franchises to the rest of the country. For each franchise he sold, he would collect 1.9% of the operator's gross sales. From that, he would give Dick and Mac half of 1%. Kroc sold 18 franchises his first year in business. But he was shocked to learn he was barely earning enough to cover his expenses.
He was so anxious to get into the business with the McDonald brothers. He basically gave them a deal that they couldn't refuse. Unfortunately, he gave them a deal on which he couldn't make any money until he met Harry Sonneborn, who showed him how to make money not on selling hamburgers, but real estate.
Sonneborn was the financial genius behind early McDonald's. Under his plan, Kroc set up a separate corporation that would purchase or lease the land on which all McDonald's restaurants would be located. Franchisees would then have to pay him a set monthly rental or a percentage of their sales, whichever was greater.
That put Ray's interest in absolute parallel with his own franchisee's interest. Franchisee was motivated to sell more, and Ray only made his money when the franchisee sold more. So the concept of renting real estate to franchisees was absolutely critical to the success of McDonald's in every respect.
With his real estate formula in place, Kroc set out to meet his goal of opening 1,000 McDonald's from coast to coast. His search for new locations was endless. Ray was in his mid-50s and spending more time away from home than ever before. This took a terrible toll on his marriage. Kroc's relationship with Ethel had been rocky for years, when in 1957, he fell in love with another woman, Joan Smith.
I was there with Ray the night that we had dinner at the Criterion restaurant, owned by Jim Zion, who had the Minneapolis McDonald franchise. And there's this cute blonde playing the organ piano combination, whose name was Joni, and I never believed in love at first sight, but he was smitten. And, you know, I may have seen a spark in her eye too, I don't know.
In 1961, Kroc ended his 39-year marriage with Ethel and launched a full-scale effort to win over Joan. But Joan decided she couldn't leave her husband.
If Ray could ever be called devastated, it's probably not the right word, because he wasn't the type of guy who'd get devastated, but he was heartbroken. But it didn't last long.
1 year later, Ray moved to California and met a woman named Jane Dobbins Dream. After just 2 weeks of dating, he married her. He later admitted that he married Jane out of convenience and that his heart was still with Joan. But Kroc's first love was always McDonald's. From 1958 to 1961, he opened over 200 new restaurants and showed no signs of slowing. Ray and his staff would scout new locations by flying over communities in the company plane, looking for church steeples. Ray believed that where there were churches, there were good American families. And that's who he wanted as customers.
That becomes his method for locating his restaurants very early on. Just very gutsy, very intuitive. Now forget the scientific and the quantitative studies, just very intuitive. And once Kroc has that restaurant there, he tells the franchisee, this is how you need to operate. This is the McDonald's system that you're franchising.
Kroc and Company developed a 75-page manual that outlined every aspect of running a McDonald's operation. Nothing was left to interpretation. Burgers had to be exactly 1.6 ounces, served with a 1/4 ounce of onion, a teaspoon of mustard, and a tablespoon of ketchup. Fries had to be cut at 9/32 of an inch thick. The manual even specified how often the restaurant needed to be cleaned. Ray wanted perfection and had no tolerance for variations by local operators.
You can't give them an inch. The organization cannot trust the individual must trust the organization. Any other way would be building on a marshy foundation that could collapse at any time.
Ray Kroc was successful because he had a formula. And as soon as you have somebody monkeying with that formula, that, I think, to Ray Kroc would be the equivalent of somebody on the Ford assembly line saying, well, I think I'll put this mirror on the car a little bit differently.
In 1961, Ray Kroc and his staff came up with a way to exercise even more control over their franchisees. In the basement of a McDonald's unit outside Chicago, they opened a training center that would eventually become Hamburger University, where students earned their degree in hamburgerology and minored in fries.
The significance of Hamburger University was to make sure people did it his way. It was like going into the Army. It was like getting a GI-issued book of how to clean your rifle, how to make your bed. This was not, McDonald's was not a place for novelty and